Hello, Judy.
Lisa, hi. It's a gloomy Saturday, but you don't look gloomy.
I don't feel gloomy. No, I went out and I actually wore a winter coat this morning on my walk because, yeah, it's wet out there. It's like spitting and kind of coldish wet feeling.
Yeah,
And I'm all about comfort over fashion when you go for a walk in the morning. But yeah, it's gloomy, but the leaves are just baby popping out
I
and
know.
it's
I'm looking out
glorious.
at this bush
Glorious.
outside my window and it's just really coming to life.
Yes, it is
Yeah,
glorious.
yeah.
So,
So,
okay, well, so much for our weather commentary. We're kind of like the news, except the opposite. Instead
yeah,
of doing the weather at the end, we do the weather at the beginning.
absolutely.
It
Gets us warmed up, right?
does, it does. So today
Uh-huh.
we're talking about time, writing and time. And I know so many people will say that they don't have time to write. It's just not in their budget of their daily life. And
Exactly.
I'm
Yeah.
going to call you on it. I think there's plenty of time.
Well, you know what? 25 years ago, I might not have taken that, but I know now that it works.
It
It
does.
works.
It
You
does.
can write a book taking 15 minutes a week to write.
Hmm.
Who knew?
And you can write a book. You don't have to have the, 2 months of uninterrupted time at a cabin with your favorite chai latte
No.
being served. Really, books are written waiting for kids in the pickup line after school. Books are written in the snips and snatches of pieces all the time
Hmm. I think
because
that's
that's called real life. I think, and do you know anybody who has this glorious uninterrupted time?
no, I
Do
certainly
anything?
don't. No, 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 no. Even
No.
my dog interrupts that, right?
Exactly, exactly. So today we're going to talk about time and how to write with snatches of time. And I
Okay.
think one of the best, now we get together and we write as part of our Sidetrack Sisters
Hmm.
meeting on Thursday nights. So we
Hmm.
devote time to our relationship with one another, to eating, to camaraderie, to laughing and friendship. But we set a timer when it's
Correct.
time to write. And I
Hmm.
think that is the gold standard. Setting a timer when you are going to write is perhaps the most important part. Having a
I agree
timer.
with that because if you don't do it, you allow so many little insignificant things to interrupt. But if the timer's running, and if you've got anybody else in the house, or, in our case, we're in a restaurant,
Hmm.
and when they can see us writing, nobody interrupts us.
No, no, exactly. And I was even thinking, in the past, when I've written like when I've struggled with doing consistent writing, even like in the morning
Mm-hmm.
before work, if you set a timer and it has a set amount of time, you can budget for it then. If you say things like, I know I've heard in the past that people, one of my favorite writing people is Julia Cameron, who wrote The Artist's Way. She's
Mm-hmm.
all about having an expectation of writing 3 pages a day in the
Mm-hmm.
morning pages.
Morning pages, right?
And I thought more that feels like a real lot to me. So I did do 3 pages, but I bought the composition size notebook, which
Mm-hmm.
helped in terms of
Made the pages smaller.
made the pages smaller, but I
Yeah.
still followed the thing. So I want to say instead of saying 3 pages a day, 10 minutes a day, or 20 minutes a day, or 30 minutes a day.
I would agree with that. And without stopping, just continue writing,
Okay,
right?
well, we're going to get into that next. We're
Right.
going to get into that. But the thing is, take a timer and put it to the time that you have allotted. 10 minutes is kind of short for us, isn't it?
A little bit.
We do 10 minutes writing and then we do a 5 minute, like we do a snooze alarm is what we do.
Uh-huh.
We do 10 minutes and an extra 5 minutes, but 15 minutes.
Well, the
Um,
5 minutes is kind of just to let you know you need to wrap it up,
right. And I
and so
never
you're
do. So
I don't.
no.
I get as far as I can get in 15 minutes. And
But
I
you know
usually,
something? Michelle, she loves her snooze alarm. And so
uh-huh,
she's the one who sets the timer. Do you recognize that? I never realized that
uh-huh,
in the past. I would
uh-huh.
just set it for 15 minutes and call it a day
I
because
would too.
the goal is to wrap it up, but we don't.
Right,
So
right,
really the purpose of setting that 10 minutes is useless for you and I.
right. Now I hear it and I just keep going. I don't
Yeah,
stop. Yeah.
interesting.
Because when I get home and, I'm either sitting on the sofa with the dog or I'm doing something and I want
Mhm,
to,
mhm,
read my writing, and I'll think, well, I'd like to bring it to a close with this, and I'll add, a couple sentences to end it.
mhm, mhm.
I don't do a lot of editing. I don't do a lot of rewriting at
Or
that point,
changing.
but
Mm-mm.
I usually wrap it up a little bit more
Mhm.
succinctly after I've had time to think about it. So,
Yeah, yeah, I agree. So I
mhm.
think setting a timer for people who are starting a writing practice or looking for ways to tweak their writing practice is the beginning thing to do. Set a timer so that you're not using excuse, I don't have the time, or today I'm just too busy.
Uh-huh. You can
I
take
think
the time.
is a
It's yours
great
to
way
take.
to say with the time that I have setting aside 5 minutes. I'm setting aside this amount of time. You
Mhm.
can do it.
Well, and every one of us has a cell phone, and they all
Exactly.
have timers on them. So
They
it's
do.
not like, oh, I don't
Mhm,
have a
mhm,
timer or whatever.
mhm.
Just put your phone. I mean, and it has a nice loud little alarm that, jars you out of your writing. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's so easy. It's
exactly.
easy.
It is. So once you got your timer, the thing that I think is also really beneficial for us as writers is once that timer is set, we write and we keep our hand moving. We don't
Yes.
sit and think about or analyze what we're writing. We just get it down on paper. I think the other thing is people think that once if they write something and it's wrong, that I don't know, the editing gods are going to come out of the sky and strike them dead with thunder and lightning.
I think you're right. And I think the reality of it is so often when the four of us get together, one of us for sure will say, oh, I have
I have
no idea
nothing
what
to
I'm going
write
to write
about.
about.
No
I have
clue.
no idea. And then Michelle will say, okay, is everybody ready? And
No.
no. And she'll say, okay, go. And
And you start. Yep.
I put my pen down and start. I
Mhm.
don't use a pencil, I use a pen, and I start writing. And it's like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And I turn
Yep.
the page and I go, I guess I did have something to write about. And it,
Well, and I'll even write something like, this is a really hard topic because
mhm.
it's okay. Whatever comes into your mind, you can take that off later. It's fine. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Um, or mother will start out. This is such
I don't know who chose this topic. Yeah,
exactly,
something like that,
exactly. Yes.
and I don't have anything to write about that, but the opposite of that is this, and I'll write about that. And she gets a little snarky. It's so okay.
It's
It's
so
all
okay.
okay. Yeah,
Hmm. So,
exactly.
but the secret is during that time, keep your
Right,
hand moving. You
right.
don't sit and start thinking or pondering or evaluating.
Evaluating. And
Mm-mm.
I have to tell you, I am an overthinker. I overthink everything except a timed writing.
Right.
I refuse to analyze it while I'm writing.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
what happens for me is when I sit down to just kind of get it ready for our blog,
Hmm.
I'll read it and I'll go, oh, I like that. That's pretty good. Not bad, and
Yeah.
very little has to be changed because
Hmm.
it's just my mind is just flowing.
Hmm.
And
And I
it's
think because the timer is set, I don't know, something clicks that the inner critic is the volume is pushed down because you
I
can
think so too.
say I'll edit this later.
Yeah. Yep. I'm not going to do that now.
Mm-mm,
Not
exactly.
going to do that now.
Hmm. And so there it really does keep you moving forward in a way that's non-critical.
Exactly.
And even if you do the critic raises her I'll
Ugly
wait,
head.
I'll later, just keep
Mhm.
going, keep going.
Be quiet.
um
Don't want you now.
what
Be quiet. Don't want you now.
Yep, not yet. Later.
Later,
Exactly.
later.
I think the next thing, talking about the critic, is okay. So we've talked about that critic in our head. I think the next thing is when you're writing, we don't cross out.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
Once again, that's an editing thing, that a critical thing. We don't cross out. We don't worry about our handwriting. We don't worry about grammar. We don't worry about punctuation.
The only exception I make to that is, as you know, I write in a journal or a
Yeah.
notebook. I don't write on the computer. And if I have a word that I've written so stupid that I'm not going to recognize it when I just put a line through it and I keep going, but it's never more than one word. You know,
Okay.
it's just, and I'll rewrite the word so I can read it later. But,
Oh,
and that's okay.
interesting.
You know,
Okay.
I call them, I call my little crossouts, they're my little spiders throughout the, you know, and I usually don't have more than one or two. So.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that about you.
Yeah, if you look at my writing when it's handwritten,
Uh-huh.
there's, you know, like I say, I'm writing fast
Yeah,
because that's not a long period of time.
it really
But,
isn't.
you know, and I can't cross out a sentence and start it over. I wrote it. Go on, you know,
Mhm.
continue,
And,
right?
exactly. I mean, sometimes I think not only are we critical about what we're writing, but we might think to ourselves, well, I don't really mean that. It's okay. Leave it. Move
Change
on,
it later.
and you can change it later. Yes.
Exactly.
So
I agree
it's
with you.
mhm.
Yeah.
I just really want, to free ourselves up from being critical about our writing while we're writing, because
Hmm.
we really want to get around that sense of editing as we write, because it's
Correct.
not the time or the place. It's just an excuse our brain offers us to
Hmm.
stop.
Hmm. And, you know, one of the things that we do at the end when we're done with our 15 minutes is we take turns reading aloud. And
Mm-hmm.
I find my best editing comes when I'm reading aloud. That's
Mm.
when we hear that we've used the same word 4 times in a paragraph, or that it's not the word we really wanted, or
Mhm,
you know, something
mhm.
like that. And so that's a time when you can maybe,
Yeah.
you know, I'll maybe put a little asterisk by it so I can go back and look at it. But I
Mhm.
think it's so critical. What you said is so critical, that to cross out and try and edit, you don't have enough time to do that. And it also stops the flow
Mhm.
of your writing, and it turns you into an analyzer instead of a writer. And that's not where you want to be.
No, not at all. Um, and the last thing, I guess, is really what this is all moving towards, is that you really want to I don't know, there's like a different part of your brain that you use when you write in
Hmm.
comparison to when you talk or talk out loud.
Hmm.
I really want people to recognize that diving in really diving into the writing brings a kind of an aliveness, a I don't know, sometimes surprising things come up, and that's really fun.
You know, I use that. I was a swimmer in school,
Mhm,
and I
mhm.
taught swimming, and I did lifeguarding, and that was my jam then, and I really enjoyed it. But one of the things that you can notice is some people have to come down the steps real slowly and, you know, get wet a little bit at a time. And then some people just dive right in, and they come up and they may be going ooh or like that, but they're in it and they start.
Mhm.
And I always think that the dive inners are more into what they're doing than the ones that are hesitating and coming down slowly.
Wow.
Writing is not a hesitation coming down slowly practice. It's a dive in practice. And the better you get at just diving in and keeping going, the better your writing will be.
Wow. I love that analogy. That's a super, really connection. Um, I think the other thing that happens is there is a purity when you're writing and you dive in. I think sometimes that kind of writing is more okay, I'm going to go with the analogy, more naked, more more true, and you've really
You're not overthinking it. You're
yeah,
not,
there's an
you're just,
authenticity that you're going for the
Yes.
jugular. I mean, all the different ways that there. Okay, I got it. There's an energy. That's it. You're really getting a different energy when you dive right in and you keep it going than when you tiptoe in, like you were talking about.
And you dive in, and now you're ready to start your swim. You're ready to start your writing. You're in the water and going, and you keep going. I think that that just feels so good when you do that. And I think when you do that with your writing, it stops the inner critic.
Yes.
It stops the inner.
That is really what this is all about, isn't it? Stopping the inner critic. Because whether you're a professional writer, a dabbler, somebody who's doing morning pages, or somebody who's, getting their legacy down on paper, whatever kind of writing you're doing, there is that insidious critic that stops us from really being authentic and getting down juicy thoughts.
I worked as a manager in a bank for 15 years, and at the end of my career, and people would come to me and say, I'm supposed to write a business letter to so-and-so, and they'd have a blank piece of paper and they'd say, what should I write? And I used to say to them, okay, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go back to your desk, and I want you to just either type it or scribble out the best letter you think you can write. I don't want you to judge it. I don't want you to do anything. And then bring it back to me, because it's much easier for me to edit
when you got something.
When I've got something than to do the whole letter. And it's not my letter, it's your letter, right?
Yes.
And so they would do that, and they'd kind of look at me like, oh, geez, here I thought she'd make it easy for me. And I'd say, no, you know the words. They were people that had the experience, right?
Yeah.
So they'd come back to me, and I'd go through, and I would edit very little.
Yeah.
And I'd say, okay, now type this up and, give it one last read, and you've got it. And they'd go, really? Yeah, well, I guess that wasn't half bad. And I'd say,
yeah.
When you sit down and you make it a commitment, and you set your, I don't have time to do that. No. Yes, you do. I'm giving you permission. How long do you think it should take? And we talk about that even. Oh, it'll take me hours. No, it won't. You don't have hours.
Exactly.
What, you want to give it 15 minutes and see what you've got?
Yeah.
And we do it that way.
Well, and even like with Sidetrack Sisters stuff, writing the intro to the podcast and all the different things, it's overwhelming. It feels so important, and it feels so, I want it to be good.
Just right. Yeah.
Yes. And really what it boils down to is set a timer. It can be edited later. Get down those first juicy thoughts. They're the ones that have the energy. And then you tweak it, and it's like, this really works. I'm surprised.
Did you ever hear the term sandbagging?
Yeah.
When you have a group of employees, like at one time I had a pretty big group, and if somebody knows that they have these 3 things to do in a day, they will stretch them out so that it takes them all day. Okay. There are others in the group that have those 3 things to do, and they sit down, they get to it, they finish it at 10 o'clock. They come to you and say, okay, done. What else can I do to help? And it was like, yep, they've got it. That's what you want to do. The sandbaggers, it took all day, and they may be 3 different things, but they were 3 things of about equal magnitude. But if they had dove in, I made up a word. If they had just dived in and got it done, they could move on to something bigger and better.
Yeah.
But, the sandbaggers never quite get that. And as a manager, I always valued those people that would just simply get started. And that's the hardest part. Sometimes the hardest part is putting the pen on the paper, putting the fingers on the keyboard, and just starting. And, I always used to say, okay, if you don't think you can put it together in paragraphs, just put down bullet points, put down sentences, put down whatever you need to put down, and then we'll figure out the order they should be in or whatever. But, almost always they knew by the time they got started, they knew.
So, I mean, I think really what it boils down to is the most important thing is getting it down. And I think a good starting point is recognizing that there is no such thing about not enough time to do what's important, either in our personal lives or in our jobs.
Right.
And I mean, really, one of the things I loved about teaching was that every day you had to do a little bit of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a time set aside, not a
Mm-hmm.
lot of time, to
Mm-hmm.
do each of the things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing how you can get little kids, 6-year-olds, from point A to point B by just writing, reading, doing a little bit of math every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And, the writing part is the same in our lives. You can write, if you want, every
Mm-hmm.
day.
Mm-hmm.
There is no such thing as I don't have time, because if you set a timer, just like with all the different things, we were talking before we started recording here about Hal Elrod's book, the Miracle Morning.
Miracle Morning. Mm-hmm.
And one of the last S that he has in his Miracle Morning is scribe.
Mm-hmm.
Every successful people write something in a journal
Every
every
day.
day.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of a self-evaluative, or it's about their thoughts or about what's going on in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing fancy, but it's a priority. And I
Mm-hmm.
think when you set a priority like that, like the other thing that we were talking about is, one of the differences between you and I is that I've always been very introspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I think writing is a great way to get in touch with your thoughts, with
Mm-hmm.
who you are and what's important to you. Um,
And that being said, what I want to say is, even like, I like to think out loud. I am an extreme extrovert. However, I get into much greater depth about my
mhm.
feelings and who I am and what I want to do when I turn silent and I write it down.
Yes. Yeah.
And it just seems like,
Mhm. I
so
think
you
once again,
can
it's a different
be,
part of your brain. I think you're looking
yeah,
at the same coin from different angles.
I think that's
Mhm.
exactly right. And, I think sometimes people think, well, I'm not the writer type. There's no writer type.
No.
The only difference is one person picks up the pen and does it, the other person talks about it.
Well, and what Julia Cameron talks about in her book, The Artist's Way, is whether you are a writer or an artist or a lawyer or a teacher or a banker or somebody in customer service, being somebody who writes consistently. I'm not saying 3 morning pages a day, but let's say 10 minutes every morning. It's going to help you get that gunk out, almost, clean out the pipes to get
Mm-hmm.
that creativity moving and going, and really keep you in touch with who you are as a person and what's important to you, what you're doing and what you want to do with your life.
I call it taking out the garbage, because some days I wake up with a lot of garbage. I've had a bad dream or I'm feeling weird or something. And if I sit down and write for just a few minutes, I can kind of say, oh, glad that's over with, and go on. But you're right, it opens up and starts rolling the creative juices.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a real energy. It brings energy.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
They always say that when you try to teach something, that often you're the one that learns the most. And what's going on in my mind is I'm thinking, I've skipped too many days of writing first thing. And so my commitment
Mm.
today to us is back at it one more time.
Okay.
15 minutes earlier in the morning so I can write for 15 minutes.
Okay. Sounds well. Next week when we get together,
You're going to ask me
I'm
about
going
it.
to ask you about it. Exactly.
Accountability is a wonderful
Nothing
thing.
like, yeah, making yourself accountable to an entire audience.
Hey, I said it loud and in public, so I got to own it.
Okay. And okay, so we'll both come next week with our journals in hand, and we'll talk about how we did with setting the timer and committing time to our writing every day.
Okay, I'm gonna say at least 5 minutes.
Okay. Oh, that sounds fair.
Okay, I mean, I don't
Mhm.
think we even need 15 minutes. I think 5 minutes.
Okay.
Okay? Is
Sounds
that a
good.
deal?
Sounds like a plan. Okay.
Okay.
Love you,
Awesome,
Judy.
Lisa.
We'll talk to
Love
you
you
next week.
too. Talk next week.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.